Welcome, everyone, to this workshop, Outcomes Assessment with an Ungraded Canvas Assignments. We are so grateful that you have chosen to spend some of your valuable time with us. I'm Greg Beyer. I'm your Distance Education Coordinator, and I also teach history.
And I am Paul Meinz. I am a researcher and IT analyst. I guess technically my title is IT Business Technology Analyst here at the college. And so what we hope to talk to you today about is how to use the Learning Mastery Gradebook in Canvas and a no submission assignment to efficiently document student achievement of course learning outcomes. And then I'm also going to talk to you briefly about the tools that you have available to analyze the data that's going to be coming out of Canvas. And so we're going to start with a little bit of background. And then Greg is going to talk to you about assessing and generating SLO data in Canvas, particularly an efficient way of doing that. And then I am going to talk about putting that SLO data to use. Once you've gathered it, I'm going to talk about a tool that I've built to help analyze the data. And then we can even discuss some other things that you could do with that data as well. And go ahead, next slide. And so a lot of people have asked us why assess outcomes data in Canvas. And the short answer from a research perspective is it's pretty difficult to find reliable quantitative data to evaluate student learning outcomes. So some people use surveys, some people kind of just take a sense of how it's going in their class. Some people use course success rates, etc. But really what happens is if you use the outcomes assessment system in Canvas, you can actually do a quantitative analysis of individual outcomes that's more fine-grained and useful than just a course success rate. So you can actually look at specific learning outcomes. You know, you might know that student course success in your course, you want to increase it, or it looks good or whatever. But this lets you look at the particular outcomes that students are doing well on, students are maybe being more challenged on, etc. And then you can take this data out of Canvas too, and I'll show you this in a tool later on, and you can join it up to the demographic information of the students to support equity work. And then finally, the third reason here is that these data can be disaggregated and used to meet an accreditation standard 1B6, which requires that colleges disaggregate their student learning outcomes data. So with those three things in mind, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the presentation to Greg.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about, do some demonstration of how to document the achievement of student learning outcomes using the tools that are in Canvas. And of course, I'll be connecting it to Socrates, not directly, but I'll be getting some data from Socrates. I've got a couple of slides here that are going to do something, let's say it this way. I'm going to start off with a way that I think can be done in any class, regardless of how you actually assess the achievement of student learning outcomes in your class. And then I'm going to show you how I do it in my history class. That may be an inspiration for you, or you may think, oh, God, I can totally do that so much better. So I'll start off with deciding what to measure. This is a screenshot of my course outline of record for one of my history classes. And I've got highlighted there the student learning outcomes, right? So this is the upper level outcomes. I've got three and only three in my history class. And all those other bullet points there are, I think we call them objectives, less than outcomes. I'm not sure. I don't care what they're called. I ignore them entirely because the detail in there's so much detail. I pull the detail for those. That's when I select my textbook. That's when I give my lectures. That's kind of where those details come in. And I'm focused just on those top level outcomes, which is also all that we have to report and all that we're documenting on. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. And I think, I'm going to get to creating the outcomes first. So let's get to the next slide first. So the first thing I do is I create outcomes in Canvas, and I'm only going to pull in those three main outcomes for the course. I'll take a quick step back and say, you see the formatting there, right? It says SLO, all capital letters, the hashtag sign, and then the number. And then the same thing for those other two. I understand from the work that Paul has not done necessarily, but has taken a look at it, that we at CRC are really good at formatting our outcomes throughout all of our curriculum. So that is a really nice way to do this. It'll make things a little bit easier if you're doing it from my stage. And I'll can talk about what might be coming soon a little bit later. So in Canvas, I'm going to create 3 outcomes. I've got 3 outcomes in my course outline of record. And the title of the outcome is the title there. You see that SLO number 1, demonstrated basic knowledge, all that. And then in the friendly name or the description, I've got the word memorize with quotation marks on it. One of the things that I do for my students is I, of course, put my course learning outcomes on my syllabus, but the language that these things are written in is not written for students. I'm not sure how often it's actually written for me. It looks like it was written by people who are experts in educational linguistics and educational language, and that's not jargon I'm all that familiar with. I'm old enough that I remember when the course learning outcome wars happened back 10 or 15 years ago. So I come at this through an experience that was pre-SLO measurements. I remember having nightmares when I was a young person in grad school that the standard assessments that the K-12 students have to take, that we would eventually get those at higher ed. And we're not there yet, but I worry that we're going to get there. So this is part of that, that experience that I have and part of my memories. And I share that because I know that a lot of our instructional faculty colleagues don't necessarily have fond feelings that come up when they think about SLOs. So I'm letting you know that I also have had that experience. So I have that word memorized because what I do in my syllabus is I have a table where I put the official wording for the outcomes, and then in the next cell in the table, I have friendly language, student-friendly language, and I give a little short title like you see the word memorized there. So I think what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to go in and into Canvas and create this and show you what this looks like. So this will be a quick demo here. I'm going to open one tab that goes to a course in Canvas, and then I'm going to open another one that's going to go to my official course outline of records. I go to Socrates. This is on the Los Rios intranet. I go to courses. I'm selecting History 310. There we go. And in case you don't know this, this is the curriculum management system for the entire district. The course outlines of record are not necessarily the same for the same course at the different colleges. So a C of course is CRC. This is History 310. So if I select that C button, I'll see my official course outline of record. There are my outcomes. I'm going to copy SLO number 1. So I've got that on my clipboard. Come into Canvas. And in Canvas on the course menu, there's a link to the outcomes tool. Now, if you've used Canvas outcomes before, this page may look different to you, and it is because it changed over the summer. And this change was one of these changes where Instructure doesn't always do the best job at, I should say it this way, they're not perfect at allowing their clients to manage how changes are perpetrated in their systems. This, I think, is an example of one of the ones that's not as efficient as it could have been. This change was coming. This is called improved outcomes management. That's what they call it. Outside of this page, everything else that I'm going to show you looks exactly as the same as it did before. So I'm going to select my course. This is called Outcomes Assessment with Canvas. And then there's a button that says Create. Oh, wait, Greg, there's a button that says Import. Can I just import this? Actually, you can. And one of the things that we don't have yet ready is a way to make efficient the import of outcomes into Canvas courses. There are 2 steps to that process. One is we are getting close to, and that is having a place where any of us could go and pick a course and get the file for that course that is formatted for this stage where we are right now. That is coming hopefully soon. What will come later that was even better is if all of our course outcomes are automatically pre-populated into all of our Canvas courses. We know the course, we know the data. Why can't we just put those 2 systems together? We haven't yet gotten there yet. It's not yet a high enough priority on the developers who work at the district office, but it will be someday. So I'm gonna have to do it manually at this point, and that's okay. I'm gonna select the create button on the outcomes page. The name is that really long name, and it's gonna look long in this box, but it's important that I put it exactly as it is in Socrates, because this is how Paul will connect this course's documents to the work that he does. You see the word friendly there. I'm going to type that word memorize. That's my friendly name for this. And I'll admit I don't know exactly where this goes, so I'm going to put it in the description too. I see friendly description. Great. For parent/student display. Okay, so this is improved indeed, because I don't remember the friendly description being invisible to students. So I'm actually going to go into my real history course and grab the syllabus so I can show you that table that I created. It's going to come back on the next slide anyway. So let's go into my history class for this semester. And there's that table that I mentioned, right? So memorize some facts about the past. That's the friendly name for that. The next part of creating an outcome is to decide the calculation method. And when I first saw this list of criteria and the calculation method and all that, I was really upset. And I was upset because for years and years, both as a student and especially as an instructor, I've worked really hard to assess student learning through the awarding of a letter grade. And every semester I change how many points my assignments are worth, because I reflect on what happened last semester. And you know what? I got too many points for the rote memorization stuff, or I got not enough points for the synthesis assignments that I have. And so I have those points because whether or not I believe in meritocracy or whether it's all just a matter of luck and hard work, I want to be able to distinguish between a C, a B, and an A grade. I know that matters to a lot of our students. It mattered to me when I was an undergrad and sometimes as a grad student. And so that work's already been done. So why am I doing that here? And this language here of exceeds mastery, mastery, all this kind of stuff, I personally don't like doing that. I think that an outcome is either achieved or not achieved. And the distinguishing between how much work students have the opportunity and choose to do, that to me is where the letter grade comes in. So what I do in my own courses is I just say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of that level and I'm going to change mastery to achieved. And I'm going to get rid of the other ones. And I'm going to say not achieved. Oops. So this is how I assess my student learning outcomes. Either they've achieved it or they've not achieved it. And Paul will show when he does his part of the presentation, it doesn't matter how we measure, we change these numbers or we have the levels and all that, because his data table will, show the achievements one way or the other. The default, which I've already erased through and I'm not going to do again, but the default for outcomes is to distinguish between achievements, they use the word mastery, and exceeding achievement or exceeding mastery. And again, that is the standard in all the literature and all the official outcomes measurement, which is why you see it as the default in Canvas. Our K-12 colleagues do that. They do the achieving mastery and all that kind of stuff. Again, for me, that's what the letter grade is for. And for my classes, the outcomes are either achieved or not achieved. And then finally, there is the calculation method. And there are 5 different options for whether or not a student has achieved the outcome. I have basically the highest score or the most recent score is one way to do it. And how this matters or where this matters is when you assess whether or not your students have achieved the outcome, are you going to assess that through multiple attempts over the course of a semester, or are you going to have a single assessment? If you are going to use multiple attempts, then the calculation method does matter. So very quickly, average is the average score. That makes sense, right? If I have 5 papers and all 5 papers achieve the same outcome, I'm going to give the students a score on the outcome for each of those 5 papers. then okay, is it going to be the average score? So if they average, 3 out of 3 in my case, maybe it's 3 out of 5 if I'm doing the mastery thing, then then Canvas will consider them to have achieved the outcome. The highest score, right? If they score a 3 at any point during the semester on any one of those assignments, they've achieved it. The most recent score, which means the most recent assignments, potentially our students are improving over the course of the semester, right? So maybe their first attempt isn't so good, but their final attempt is. So that could be the most recent score. Do I want them to achieve that score a certain number of times over the course of the semester? So if I have 5 assessments that are assessing this outcome, and I want them to achieve mastery or achieve the outcome, on 3 of the 5 or 4 of the 5, right? Those are decisions that I have. And then finally, decaying average, which is actually a good thing despite its negative term, decaying. Decaying. I don't like that word, but decaying basically means that the most recent score will be worth more than the prior assessments, right? And I just spent however many minutes talking about all these different calculations. I already do this for my grades. I think very long and hard about how many points each assignment is worth. And so I don't want to have to do that. And again, so this is my own way of fighting against the machine, if you will. So I say highest score, because I'm only going to do a single assessment. Okay, I'm going to click the create button here, and I'm going to stop right there for the demo. I could do this 2 more times for the other 2 outcomes, but I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has any questions about what I've done so far, copying the outcome from Socrates and creating an outcome in Canvas.
Greg, I guess one question that I have would be, since some of us have major SLOs and then categories underneath it, would we create separate outcomes for each of those subcategories as well, or would those be better placed inside the description field?
That's a great question. I'm going to attempt an answer, and then Paul, I think you might have a better answer. To me, the only ones that I'm using Canvas to document whether they've achieved it, right? What I just did in terms of assessing, attaching an outcome to an assessment, which I know I haven't demonstrated yet. It's only for the ones that have this label SLO1 in this class, right? SLO2, SLO3. Classes have different numbers of student learning outcomes. I know there are some that have 6 or 7 or maybe even more. And I think there are some that may have fewer than 3. But Paul's pulling from Canvas the assessments data for just the ones that have that SLO in the title. And so to answer your question, if the outcomes, the sub-outcomes that you're mentioning, if they have that as part of the title, then yes, they would be assessed separately. Paul, is that?
Yeah, exactly. So you would probably want to put those sub-objectives like in the descriptive text of the SLO is basically how that would work. The way the system is working right now, I only extract, for the dashboard, you're going to see I only extract that high-level SLO. So it doesn't support like the individual assessment of each of the objectives at this point. So I think the best spot would be to put it in the descriptive text as you stated.
The way outcomes assessment works in Canvas, 3 things must be true. Number 1, you must have an outcome, at least one, right? I've got one in this sample course. You must have outcomes. Number 2, those outcomes must be attached to a rubric. You can attach one outcome to as many rubrics as you want. You can also attach multiple outcomes to a single rubric. That's what I'm going to show you in my example. And the rubric must be attached to an assessment. It must be attached to an assignment. So if you don't have all 3 things, then none of the outcomes work in Canvas is worth anything really to anyone. Separate from connecting with the work that Paul does to connect it with our students and who they are and our assessment reporting, unless all 3 things are true, then you're not getting anything done except adding some data on a web page. So I've done the first step, right? I've created the outcome. The next one is to create a rubric, and then you have to attach the rubric to an assignment. So what I've done here is I've got a screenshot of the description for an assignment. I hope that makes sense, right? The description for an assignment, and this assignment is not worth any points. The students don't have to do any work. This assignment is the one that I use to assess the achievement of student learning outcomes for the course. Back into Canvas, I'll go into rubrics. I'm going to create a rubric. And I'm going to call this my SLO achievement assessment. And there's a link here that says find outcome. If I select that link, it's going to have the outcomes that are from this course, right? I've only got one, so I'm only going to be able to attach one. I'm going to click on that. And then let me show you what this looks like actually in my history class. I don't have to recreate this all this time. So here is my history class. Again, this is real. If I go into rubrics and I create a new rubric, and I'm going to call this SLO. Oh, you know what? It's already there. Outcome achievement rubric. Never mind. Let's take a look at that. So here's the rubric that I have for my history class for this semester, right? You can see that it has 3 criteria. Each of the criteria is worth 3 points, total value of 9. And for each of the criteria, there are 2 ratings, achieved or not achieved. That's all pulled directly from the outcome. Also, you can see that the title for each criteria has got a little, I guess that's a target icon on it. And so that lets me know that that's an outcome. So let's go back to the demo. Let me finish that. In fact, let me cancel this and start again. So I've created a new rubric. I've titled it SLO Achievement Rubric. And then I select the link to find outcome. I've only got one in the class, so I've selected it. I've got this option here to use criterion for scoring. I don't think this matters, but I'm going to leave it on for now. Let's see what happens. Right, there's that friendly description. I'm going to click import. You see the calculation method, right? That was when I created the outcome. And then now I'm going to delete this default rubric criterion that's always there when you create a new rubric. So right now I have created an outcome that has a single criterion. I'm sorry, I've created a rubric that has a single criterion, and that criterion is the outcome for the course. So I'll click the Create Rubric button. So now I've met 2 of my 3 steps, right? I've created the outcome, I've created a rubric. Now I'm going to attach that rubric to an assessment.
Greg, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I think here you would want to make this not count as part of the score. So that option needs to be unchecked.
I think you're right.
Otherwise they'll end up getting graded.
I think you're right. Although on the assignment too, I have that option. So, let's see. Let's. I can't even edit this rubric. Oh, there's the edit button right there.
And then click
find outcome. Yeah. So let's do this. Let's get rid of that. Do that again. Turn off scoring. Import. Okay. So I still have the 2 ratings. Turn off scoring. I still have the points that are listed. The points have to be there for the outcome assessment. So let's go ahead and update the rubric. Now I'll create an assessment. And then what I have in my screenshot over here, these are the instructions for the assessment that I use in my history class. And you'll notice here that it says to students, right? Remember the outcomes for this course. In this syllabus, I list them, define them, and show how those assignments will connect to them. I have that table that's from my syllabus. And then I tell my students, you've already done all the work. This is for me to do. This is where I do an assignment. So I don't want my students to be confused about seeing this assignment and do they have to do anything. So I make sure that's very clear to my students. And so I'll go ahead and again, go through this, create an assignment. It's going to be, I'll go straight to more options. I'm going to call this my SLO Achievement Assessment. SLO Achievement Assessment. I mentioned, I'm not going to type all the words there, but since I have it open already, I'm going to just copy this table from my syllabus, paste that there. I lost the colors. That's okay. I guess I could put those back. Oh, look what it did to the numbering. Thanks, Canvas. The numbering really doesn't matter, right? Just get rid of that. I know I could type it in. Again, this is a 0-point assignment. There's no submission for the students, so that's all very important. I will click Save and Publish. And then I'm going to attach a rubric. And the rubric that I'm going to attach, so I select the Find a Rubric button, is that one that I just created. And oh, I have to find it on this list here. Thanks, Canvas. Okay, outcomes assessment. So there's the course. Use this rubric. And now I'm going to edit this rubric because I want to make sure I select the option to use this rubric for assignment grading. I can't remember if I did that before or not. Let's go back over here. I think this improved outcomes assessment is throwing me off. Okay, personal accounts assessment. Oh, remove points from rubric. That's what I need to select, right? Because I want to reduce student confusion. Remove points from rubric. That one, I don't have to worry about the grading. And then I click update rubric. Okay. So now I have done all three steps, right? I have created an outcome, I have created a rubric, and then created an assignment. Now, I could have created the rubric on the fly, right? Because you can create a rubric as part of creating an assignment. Now I'm ready to assess these students. I think I have students in this class. Oh, wonderful, I have some hobbits. So now if I go to that assignment page and I select speed grader, for each student, so starting off with Frodo Baggins, I click view rubric. And for each student, I'm going to select achieved or not achieved. And then I'm going to hit save. And then I'm going to go to the next student in my speed grader. I'll say that Eleanor has achieved it. Sam did not, spent too much time gardening. Lobelia, everyone's afraid of her, so I'm going to say saved. Okay, so I've done this now for each of my students. And now I can go into the Canvas gradebook and I can view the Learning Mastery gradebook, and I have to enable that as a feature option. At this moment, I've actually done all the work that I need to do for this course because Paul can pull the data from this course and attach it to the dashboard. The Learning Mastery Gradebook is a way for me to look at an overall view of my outcome achievements for this class. And you can also enable the Learning Mastery Gradebook for students so they can look at outcome achievements. I don't enable it for students because I think I do a good enough job explaining to them what the outcomes are. And then for each of my assignments, I tell them which assignments, which outcome it helps them achieve. So I hope that that worked for them. The last 2 semesters I've done this, I didn't get any questions from students about why can't I see my individual learning outcome achievement thing. I don't know that our students are that attached to that information. They want to know that they passed the class, and some of them really care about their grade. So I'm going to go to feature options, and I'm going to enable the Learning Mastery Gradebook. And now on the grades page, on the gradebook menu, I can switch to Learning Mastery. And this view here gives me an overall look at the achievements of my my assessment of student learning outcome achievements for the overall class. You know, I've got one outcome here, right? So there's the overall view. I've got 3 of 4 achieved it. And then I can also select for each student. If I select an individual student, I can see this link, the tray that pulls out, I can go to the student's grades. Okay. So that's kind of me showing all that. And again, I think that what I just showed you could work for any class, because for any class, we have to document the achievement of student learning outcomes. We should be doing that on an individual basis. So without getting into calculation methods, however I assess that already, I can create the single standalone assignments. And I hopefully showed you how easy it was that I can go student by student. I've already got, right, this assessment data, however I actually assessed it, which is going to be, individual. It's going to differ probably from class to class. I haven't yet shown you how I do that, but I hope that makes sense. And let me pause here to see if you have any questions on that last part of it.
I have a question on the rubric. Let's say one way that you test the memorization would be through quizzes that they need to have names, dates, events. Would you then need to go back to quiz 1, 2, 3, midterm 4, 5, 6, final, and then you're separately looking at that in the grade book? Or are you going off of, yeah, this person ended up with a B+ in the class or a B in the class, so they must have met that? Like, where is that kind of granular part coming in?
That's coming up in
okay.
my example, yeah. But the short answer to your question is yes. And what you could do, and I don't do this, but you could take a regular assignment. So let me pop into my my history class again. You could take a regular assignment. So let me go take a look at one of my writing assignments. So here's one of my writing assignments, and I have a rubric for it. You can see this rubric is fairly detailed. How many criteria do I have? Oh my God, 6, 7. I would have to add an 8th criterion, and that 8th criterion would be the outcome. And then when I'm grading each student's submission, right, I'm clicking in each of these boxes as I'm grading it. I would then have to click an 8th box, And then I would have to, and then here's where I worry about student confusion, is you can remove the points from the individual criterion that's attached to the outcome. Our students going to be worried about, in this particular example, right, 7 criteria, and they get a level for each of those criteria, and those things all add up to 60 points. And then there's this 8th criterion that doesn't have any points, and what does this mean? Did I achieve the outcome and all that, right? I don't think students need that extra level of cognitive load, right, that they're dealing with. And really, the achievement of student learning outcome, it's yes, for their benefit, but the documentation is really for us and for accreditation and the college. It's nothing, that's not about the students. And so that's kind of how I do it. And then you're about to see in my classes how I dispense with having to do this on each additional thing. Okay, let me see. I think my next thing might
Greg,
be...
quick question. There's a lot of assessment that's done outside of Canvas.
Why is Canvas being used?
Yeah.
Because we have a requirement in a contract that every single course must be published in Canvas. We have to use Canvas anyway. Why not use a tool we're already using to do this other work that we have to do? It helps your students to know what their grade is at any time in the semester. And the easiest way to do that is to put every single assessment in Canvas. You can use Canvas to share feedback with students without using Canvas to collect the things that they are using that you will assess to generate that feedback. So how they do the assignments, how they do the work, how you assess their work, you don't have to use Canvas at all. It helps students because they're already going to Canvas for every single one of their classes. It helps students if every single one of their classes has their grade data in it. But we don't have that requirement. That's not a requirement for us. All we have to do with Canvas, right, is put our contact information, put our syllabus, publish it, and make sure that our students are visiting Canvas, right? So I'm next going to show you, and here's a screenshot basically from my history class, right? This is A students, and this is my grade on this last assignment. And you can see this one student's, right? They achieved 2 of the 3 outcomes in my class. When I first learned about student learning outcomes and I first started doing the hard work of understanding what they were, which was hard for me at the time, and I know, and I shared with this earlier, I felt some resentment at feeling like I had to do work twice. Like I was grading my students twice. I already grade my students, right? Yeah, maybe my students would benefit from more rubric. Okay, I get that. That makes sense. But I don't want to do all this. So over time, what I did was I took every single one of my assignments and I then made it so that each of those assignments is only associated and only aligned with one of my course outcomes. And then what I did in Canvas was I took all those assignments and I made groups, and 3 of my 5 assignment groups are affiliated with outcomes, right? So you see on the screen here, I have a group called Getting Started Assignments. So post the introduction, pre-course survey, take my quizzes on academic integrity and what a primary source is. Those are all things that students have to do during the first week to maintain their enrollments in the class. I do that in lieu of taking attendance because I'm teaching an asynchronous online class. That's not connected to an outcome, right? And then you see the 5th group. At the end of every module, I have an assignment. My students must earn a ticket to leave by doing a quick little, it's like a 1 question, how are you feeling? That reflection stuff that's good for students. I have a midterm self-assessment, and then my final exams are entirely reflection. I don't ask my students for the data information dump. Don't regurgitate all the crap you think you learned. Tell me in your own words what you think you learned, right? That's kind of how I do that. So my final exam is not part of the outcomes assessment. And again, neither is the first week. And then the middle 3 groups, I've titled, those are those friendly names there, right? Like memorize. I've titled those 3 groups to match my 3 outcomes. And in the work that I have done over time, I have come to terms with the relative point value for each of those groups towards the overall point value in the class, and equating that more or less with the equivalent worth or value of those individual outcomes, right? Nowhere does it say in my history class of 3 student learning outcomes, nowhere does it say in curriculum that student learning outcome 1 must be worth 20% of the final grade and student learning outcome 2 must be worth 40%. And right, we don't have to do that at all. And it's up to us as individuals to value, if the points are equivalent to value, the lower order thinking skills, right? Memorize, those are definitely lower order thinking skills. And that's my students. I give them a quiz. Did you read the checkbook, the textbook? Answer one of the comprehension questions from the test, right? Very, very low level thinking things. Is it appropriate, or should I make that only worth 10% of the final grade in the class, right? It's one of the three outcomes, so should it be equal? There's no perfect answer to those questions, and thank goodness there's no legislated answer to those questions. So what I did for my class is I decided that the relative point value of each assignment within each of these groups was a good enough demonstration of the amount of learning that I think my students are doing in order to achieve that, okay? So I'm basically trusting my own work I did previously in terms of valuing each of these assignments. And I'm also trusting because a C is a passing grade, and my job as an instructor is to help my students get to a C. If they want to get a B or an A, great. Here's some extra work you can do. My job is to help them get to a C. And remember that for outcomes achievements, it's either yes or no, pass, not pass. Oh, passing is a C. Great. What's a C worth? Oh, 70% is a C grade. So what I do for each of these outcomes is for each of these assignment groups is I say, if a student has achieved an average, score once all assignments have been graded, if they have achieved 70% or higher in the assignments group, in the assignments within that group, then they have achieved that outcome. So here's a screenshot from my history class. I think this is from the spring. Student number 1, they achieved all three outcomes, right? They got 100% on memorized, 86% on recognized, and 72% on analyzed. Student 2, they achieved outcome 1 and outcome 3, but not outcome 2. Student 3 didn't achieve any of the outcomes. Student 4 should have dropped the class. This is my assessment of student learning outcome achievements. And then on that assignment that I showed you before, I pull up two browser windows. One has a speed grader for that assignment. One is the section of the gradebook where these scores are calculated automatically. And I just go student by student, check, 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 check. And then I get that work done. For me, as an instructor who's already done the work of attaching each assignments to an outcome, creating these assignment groups was actually pretty easy. And the last thing I did was I renamed these assignment groups because I want my students to know, because I tell them in the syllabus, these are the outcomes. And the syllabus says, right, for each assignment, this is how you're achieving it. I also want them to see on the grade book, yeah, they are working towards these outcomes. This is how I get the little pitter patter of assignments all the way through. This class I have overall has got like 70 frickin' assignments. I don't know why I did that, but they're all some of them are summative, but a lot of them are small and easy to grade. 16 of them are those multiple choice quizzes I don't have to do. There's another 16 where I'm reading a paragraph or they're writing to answer a comprehensive question. So the grading is relatively easy, but because I've set up this system, I don't have to do something separate or extra work for the student learning outcome achievement, student learning outcome achievement assessment.
So if I can just do a quick clarifying question.
Yeah.
So in your grade book, when you go to look at it, it already has like, here are all your chapter quizzes that are already grouped as outcome 1. So you have it as one column. You're not going through 16 columns to figure that out?
Yes.
Because that's my grade book is wide. Like I've got a lot of columns for a lot of stuff. And so that's my thing, is kind of digging back and forth to find stuff.
Yeah. So on the Canvas assignments page, right, these assignments groups, we can't get away from Canvas automatically reporting and displaying to students the percentage, not even points, the percentage of points possible for each of these assignment groups. So on the students' view of the grades page, they automatically see, each assignment is listed there, of course, and if it's been graded points or letter grade or whatever we have, they also get a total grade at the bottom, and then right above the total grade are all these assignment groups. And so it's important that we are deliberate in what we name those assignment groups, because our students are going to see that. And we want them, I hope we want them to think that we know what we're doing. In the gradebook itself, if you scroll all the way to the right, automatically, and it's always visible, even if you're only showing grades from a certain module or grades from a certain whatever, you always see for all the visible students, these 3 columns, or I'm sorry, it'd be 5 columns, right, in my class. So I got 5 assignment groups. So this is also always visible as well. I like all this because I'm taking advantage of stuff that's going to be there anyway. And I mean, stuff in Canvas is going to be there anyway, in addition to the, not having to grade stuff twice.
So I'm kind of new to the district. So
Yeah.
this learning outcome assessment, like we have to do it for each courses for like this, or how does it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to answer it in several different perspectives. I'll be blunt and direct with my answer. And I'm mindful that I'm speaking to a new faculty, and I wish I had heard some of these things when I started. The documentation of the achievement of student learning outcomes is a college responsibility, and it's part of our accreditation standards. So we have to do that at one level or another. What we have done so far, and I think Paul mentioned this briefly earlier, is, and I haven't done this because I'm not a full-time instructional faculty member, so please tell me if I'm wrong, and if I'm right and you don't want to admit that this is what happens, then that's okay too. But I have heard, sorry for the passive voice, that faculty by departments gather together periodically and they talk about each of the outcomes for each of their classes. And they talk about how is the outcomes going and are students achieving the outcomes. And they agree that they are or they aren't. And they have thoughtful, and I'm sure this is true, thoughtful discussions about, hey, you know what? Outcome one in this class, all the History 310, right, instructors, yeah, my students are having a hard time with this. What are you doing in your class to help your students achieve it, right? They will share notes about how they're doing that kind of stuff. And then that data, they decide as a group, are our students achieving this outcome? Our students, notice the plural, and then they are inputting that data into, I think, our planning a software. And then it does get collected and does get reported, but I don't think we are yet doing the demographic breakdown of our SLO achievements. So this system, whether you attach the outcome to every single assignment and figure out the calculation method, whether you create a single assignment like I did, this system will help us do the demographic breakdown. The best answer to this question is talk to your department faculty and find out how it's done there, because that's really where it currently is done right now. It's kind of department by department.
I think we just started doing this with faculty recently that were interested in doing it. So this is kind of hopefully making this information useful to people and not just some sort of rote accreditation exercise where you fill out a form and every 6 years come back to it. So it's an attempt to help people actually get useful data out of this exercise. So this is brand new. So you wouldn't have seen it before. Oh, and I see my slides are up. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good to move on. It's a good segue.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about putting the data to use. And so basically what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you what happens after you enter this data into Canvas, what the research office can help you with. Right now we have a dashboard that I'm going to show you. That's the biggest thing. But we can also discuss some other uses for this information. But before I get to that dashboard, I want to talk about some technical details. So if you remember in the demonstration, and hopefully this could make your life easier as well if you kind of know the SLO numbers. Greg went in and he copy and pasted the SLOs, and we're working on a way for you to be able to like navigate to a folder and import them into your class so that you wouldn't have to do that. If that is a lot of work, I am personally very disorganized in my thoughts. Sometimes maybe it doesn't seem like that, but I am. Having more than 2 or 3 tabs open on my computer, I just can't. So I could see why that could be an issue. So if you were having difficulties with that, you could just write the SLO number. So basically you write the text SLO followed by a number in any format, as long as that matches to the order of the SLO as it's written in Canvas. So you could write SLO1 and you could write whatever short form text after that you wanted to do. And my database processing code, when it pulls this Canvas data out, will recognize that number. It'll take that number, it'll look inside of Canvas and be like, oh, you meant SLO1. And it'll pull the actual text for SLO1 into the database. So as long as you write your SLOs like that, if you don't feel like copy and pasting, you can do it that way as well. And hopefully that saves you some tabs. I know I find that valuable. Okay, next slide. And so another thing to keep in mind here too is that as Greg demonstrated, there's lots of different ways that you can set up your scales. And this is your academic and professional freedom. to determine how to evaluate whether or not students are achieving your learning outcomes or learning what you want them to learn. And so it's really important to point out here that, for example, you might have one instructor who has like a 3-point scale and they define mastery as 2. You might have another instructor who has a 5-point scale and a mastery of 4. And then even, if you're looking at your own data, you might decide years from now that you want to update your scale and look at things differently. And so what we have to do in this dashboard, and this is important for the interpretation of the dashboard, is find ways to standardize the data so that it has the same interpretation from year to year, and you can aggregate it across courses, etc. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And so there's a couple of ways that we do this. The first way is the best way, in my opinion. What we do is it's basically like how you calculate a final grade. You take the maximum number of points, you divide the student's score by the maximum number of points, that gets you a score between 0 and 1. If you multiply that by 100, it's a percentage. So basically, let's say that the SLO maximum points was 5 and a student's score was 4. I'd divide 4 by 5, you get 0.8. And so that puts everybody's scores on the same scale, regardless of where they said their maximum score was. You could have a professor that had a 50-point scale and a professor that had a 1-point scale or a 3-point scale like Greg specified, but everything will be on 0 to 1 using that particular scale. The next method is less consistent. It does get things kind of on a smaller scale so that they're comparable, but it's dividing by the mastery value. This is also interesting to instructors because you might want to see like how many students go above your mastery value. So in this circumstance, if let's say the teacher or the instructor, excuse me, said that mastery was 4 and the student got a score of 5, then their value here would be 1.25, 5 divided by 4. And so you can kind of see how far students are going above or below mastery in your course. And that's another way of standardizing things because it brings them down onto a smaller scale, so you're less likely to get extreme values kind of pulling your data or average left or right. So with those two methods in mind, there's the percentage of maximum and the percentage of mastery. We are now prepared to take a look at this dashboard to see what you can do with this data once you've entered it into Canvas and we've extracted it out at the end of the semester. So I am going to grab the screen away from you, Greg. This is the SLO dashboard that I have developed. And I've actually improved this with feedback from the faculty and academic senate as well. And so what happens is you log into this dashboard and your data is displayed. So just the data for your own classes are displayed right here in this dashboard. And you're not going to see anything at first because you haven't selected a course. So I'm going to go through, and I'm not an instructor, so I had to make up some fake data. So I'm going to pick my course that I've been teaching for quite some time now, CRC 300. Okay. And then you can see that once I pick CRC 300, a table pops up here in the middle. And the score type I'm looking at right now is the percentage of maximum SLO score. So basically, I'm taking the student score and dividing by the maximum SLO score. And these are the average values broken down by the demographic groups I have displayed here. Right now, I have race ethnicity here. And you can see that there's a column for each SLO. And then I can mouse over each box and see how many assessments there has been for that particular SLO for that student group. And then the thing about SLOs is they don't make very good column headers. If I put the SLOs in this table, it would go way off your screen. You'd have to scroll for days. So you can actually see the SLO values right here in the drop-down menu. Again, this is a fake class, so I do some things. I have learned some things, learned some important things, and then learned that June is the best cat because June is my cat, so of course she's the best cat. And so what you can do here actually is you don't just have to look at this demographic variable. We can change the demographic variable. I can look at income level. I can look at foster youth status. I can look at age, veteran status, etc. So you can change the disaggregating variable. And then in addition to that, and this is based off of feedback from the campus community, you can also filter over here. So if I wanted to look at race and ethnicity, but I just wanted to look at it for low-income students, I could select low income, and I could pick like below poverty and low, to see how those students were doing in my class, to see how they were achieving student learning outcomes. And just looking at this, the data in the table in the middle, you can see how this could be quite useful. For example, let's say you found like an equity gap in your course for, I don't know, like African-American students. Well, right here, I'm looking at the data and I can see, oh, wow, SLO3 seems to be maybe more difficult for this group. So I could check the name and be like, oh, they're struggling on learn some important things here. And so it could actually help in brainstorming, not just for a particular group, but for all of your students, where to help improve the instructional experience for students there. And then you might also be interested in trends over time as well. So if you were doing this multiple semesters in a row, you could look at view trend data. And then I'm going to pick my course. And I'm going to pick an SLO. I'm going to do some things, and you can see the trends over time for particular demographic groups. And again, we have the same sort of process here. I can look at enrollment status. I can look at income level, etc. And then I can even drill down with these filters at the top of the chart there. And so this can kind of help you reflect over time and thinking about, if you notice that a certain group or all your students have increased in a particular term, it can help with reflection about, what was different in my class that semester where students achieved that outcome at a higher rate. So basically what happens is that this dashboard gets populated around the time that I update the Hawk Dash. We did a presentation on that yesterday as well. So I pull all the Canvas outcomes out of Canvas, and then I join it up to student demographic information, and then I push it up into this dashboard for people to log in and see their data. And so I can stop. Well, actually, I'll leave it up on the screen, and I'll see if anybody has any questions about calculation methods or things that might want to be added to the dashboard, etc. So I'll stop right there to see if anybody wants to chime in.
For individuals, the data will only be there if we've been using the tool. Right.
Yeah, so there's actually there's some instructors on campus that will have data in this dashboard, including you, Greg. But yeah, exactly. So you would need to have evaluated student learning outcomes in Canvas in order for the data to show up in this dashboard.
I've got another question, and that is, rather than us manually going through the process of populating these outcomes, is there a way, since we already have them in Socrates, to draw them out and maybe deposit them in a Canvas course from which we could then relatively easily import all this?
That is a fantastic question. So there's a couple of answers to that. One is that what I'm going to try to work on this semester or year is to create a folder on the S drive that has the student learning outcomes, so that you could click import and it would like default to that folder. You navigate to it, you pick the ones for your class. It's a little more difficult because each one has to have a unique identifier, right? So basically I have to create a file for each individual class, not just like the high level course of record. So that's a little more difficult because like a lot of times those things change until like census. So maybe I would have to do it at the end of the semester to like have people be able to import it or something. I'm not sure, but yeah. So that's the first answer. The second answer is that I think maybe it's possible, we'd have to talk to DOIT to just have them by default be put into the class based off of the course of record.
Exactly.
And then that would just be so easy. It would save you copy and pasting, etc. And then it would just be a matter of creating that ungraded assignment, attaching that rubric to it, and then just like when you're doing your grading at the end of the semester, just like go through and rate the outcomes there.
Yeah, and I'll add that the format for the import file is actually linked from that outcomes page, right? The outcomes management page. It's a CSV file, and it tells you what, the required columns, required cells and everything. But the one of those things is a unique ID. So an ordinary individual instructor would have to have a unique ID for their outcome if they're going to do a text file import. And once an ID is taken, since it's unique, it can't be reused. So I can't imagine problems.
I would have to auto-generate that key And it would probably be something like the term code, the instructor ID, the class number, so that it's unique to each file. And then you'd have to make sure, hopefully people would like open the right file, because then if somebody else opened the wrong one, then you'd have like conflicts there. So yeah, it has its pitfalls, but I think it's something that we could maybe do.
And this has been a request from the LMS coordinators for years, is let's get these outcomes into Canvas by default, because we know the information, because they're all official courses and we have official course outlines of record. I don't think that our other colleges in Los Rios are as well organized on their course outlines of record in terms of identifying the SLOs as we are. I think that is a fair statement to say. So unfortunately, that would be a barrier to doing something district-wide. But why not work on doing something for the campus? Because we could model for everyone else.
And as I was thinking about the use of these data, if people are going to gather them, one other thing that I think would be extremely useful for departments is, I think pretty much maybe not every department, but a lot of departments have like a short sequence of courses where you have like a prerequisite course and a course after that. A lot of departments have stuff like that. Imagine the coolness of being able to be like, okay, the program getting together and looking at the students that pass the prerequisite course and then seeing the outcomes where they achieve high in the next course or don't do so well in the previous or in other outcomes, and being able to look at your curriculum and be like, oh, wow, okay, so these students, they're actually struggling on this skill in the next level. It would be really cool if we could maybe address that in the course before. So like you can just kind of imagine the power of these data beyond just like the reporting aspect of it. But this could be something extremely useful for departments trying to figure out if their students are achieving their learning outcomes and finally ultimately completing an award or degree at CRC.
I have a question kind of along those lines, and you guys might not be the correct people to direct it to. It might be a union issue. I'm in a really tiny department. We have some classes that are only taught by adjuncts that have the last 10 times we've offered it have only been taught by adjuncts. And my understanding is contractually, this falls outside of some of their workload. And I was the only one in the department as a full-timer, and I was trying to do all the assessment stuff. I had no idea because I had never taught the class. I didn't have anything written from anyone. I was calling people, begging them to just tell me, like, how are they doing? Are they passing? Or, what are they hitting these skills? That might be part of what Greg was talking about in terms of like codifying, like how to get the information from folks in our departments. But I feel like that's a hiccup that some of us are going to be potentially dealing with. Even if we're super on board with adopting this, being able to look across a full department, or in a large department, if 3 faculty members are doing this and 18 are not, or 14 are not, then what does that look like with the data?
You bring up a really good point. The system is only going to be as useful as people use it, right? The data won't be, if I'm the only history instructor who's using it and I only teach one class a semester, it's great for me, I guess, but it's going to be hard to make that relevant across the departments. Question is, how do we normalize this type of assessment and just make it part of what we do? I don't know that our contract specifies, what we do for grading, and we have to fill out final grades. So, maybe there's a thing that could be added to our professional responsibilities. I know one of the criteria, right, is maintains grading records. That's one of our 17 criteria that instructional faculty are evaluated on. Why couldn't a peer review team say, hey, let's grading includes the assessment of student learning outcome achievements? That could be an interpretation of that, and it might need to be worked out, through an MOU or through whatever. But that's, I think, a really good question. And then how do we, as part of the onboarding process for new faculty, whether they're full-time or adjunct, are we including this, right? This is where you submit your grades. Here's a way to document student learning outcome achievements. It's an accreditation standard, right? That's the biggest connection to power. So we have an accreditation site visit coming up this semester. are they going to come back and say, yeah, you know what, you guys aren't yet doing the individual, or not the individual, it's the demographic breakdown. You know what, you guys should be doing it. And we might be inspired through their action to make this a more formal, I mean, whatever system we use, right, whether it's this or not, to make that a more formal structured process for ensuring that something gets done. And then if it's formal and required, then we'll hopefully be able to muster up the resources that we need, in particular small departments, in particular those course sequences that are most likely taught by adjunct faculty, so that we can make it more easy and more effective to collect this type of these data.
Yeah, I saw the outcome on Canvas, but I never used it before. But this workshop is very useful to know how to use it. And maybe it's better to be formalized this way for all the faculty, maybe better. I'm new, so I don't know. I didn't talk to my department, but yeah, after learning about it, it's good tool, I think. Yeah.
Well, to make it effective too, don't you have to standardize the learning objectives themselves? Okay.
That's already been done, because we have those in our course outlines of record. So that work has been, and we at CRC have been, again, very well organized. How each of us assesses each student's achievements, that is up to us individually. So that doesn't have to be standardized. I hope it's never standardized, because I love the diversity of approaches that we all bring to instruction. We have the same outcomes for the same courses. How we help our students achieve those outcomes is up to us. How we document and measure whether they've achieved those is also up to us. So I think that we don't have to worry about the standardization. And I hope, and I assume, I know I would fight against the standardization that's not appropriate for free-thinking professional individuals.
I have one general question about the student learning outcome assessment for the accreditation purpose. Like, how often we need to do that? Like,
we get an accrediting visit about every 6 years.
Every 6 years.
So basically what needs to happen is that the student learning outcomes assessment would have to happen at least every 6 years. Okay. Obviously, if you want the data to be useful, you'd want to do it more frequently than that. If you're going to use it in like improving instruction, program, etc., checking in on your students, you'd want to do it much more than that. But that's the accreditation requirement aspect of this. I will say that one of the recommendations that comes out of the visit is going to be the disaggregation of data, mostly because that's one of the things we listed that we're still kind of like as part of our improvement plan. And this was like a recently added accreditation standard as well, too. So there's just a lot of colleges that I think they're going to be struggling with this. There isn't a lot of systems for this. So
thank you, everyone, for joining us at this session again. It's really exciting to see this much interest in a topic that can be dry and also has a history of contention here at CRC in Los Rios throughout higher education. This has been something that's been tough for many of our colleagues to digest, and hopefully we'll get to a place where we are better able to support our students through effective analysis of the data that they are helping us generate as we measure student learning outcome achievements.
I think I'll never forget, Greg, the moment when you logged into your grade book and you're like, oh, great, I have hobbits.